Well, welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, we are going to be previewing LSU's upcoming game against Southeast Louisiana, and then talking about the big games that are going to be going on in week 4 of college football. But of course, we are going to start by talking about this game on Saturday night against Southeast Louisiana. And look, all I can really say about it is that it is a game that you have to go out there and play. Obviously, this does not hold the same level of excitement as your opening game against Clemson. It does not hold the same amount of excitement as your game against Florida did, even with Florida being unranked, just because of the rivalry and all that. It was an awesome game, and you were pumped up for it. But now you have another one of these games where you got to go into Saturday night, Death Valley, and it should be a really good environment, at least to start. It's sold out once again, and hopefully you come out playing a little bit more excited than you did against Louisiana Tech. But the thing is with Southeast Louisiana not even being an FBS school, this being FCS, there's not even a line on this game. Like I can't find a spread from at least the ESPN app or Bleacher Report app. They don't have a spread on this one from what I've seen, and so really, this is just one of those games where, yeah, LSU, there really, I guess, doesn't need to be a spread. LSU should come in here and win this one handily, but we also kind of thought the same thing about Louisiana Tech. We thought, well, we should go into Louisiana Tech and handle them pretty well. But that's the thing. You just, you never know how you're going to play when you're playing a smaller school. But hopefully, that Louisiana Tech game will light a little bit of a fire for LSU to come into this one and just play, straight up LSU ball and just dominate the whole time. At least that's what I'm hoping for. But, this is one of those interesting games where it's like when you're talking about it, there's really not so much X's and O's to go over, like key matchups or anything like that, because on paper, LSU should, own every position group on the field. That just should be the case. But there are still some things that when I look at both sides of the ball, I do want to see. I still want to see certain things when I'm watching this game from both sides, as we continue to move forward for the season at large, more than just this game with Southeast Louisiana. We'll start with defense because honestly, the defense just doesn't, there's not a whole lot of notes here for me. Honestly, the first thing I wrote was just keep up the good work, and I put the shrugging emoji because it's like, yeah, let's just keep up the good work here. Let's just keep doing what you've been doing. It's working. Your defense has been playing phenomenally when it comes to effort, when it comes to just, your style of play, all those things. You've been awesome in every phase defensively. And by all means, you should go out there Saturday night and absolutely just shut them down. And, maybe they'll take advantage of you once the backups come in at some point. But up until then, just keep laying the hammer down. There's no other way to put it other than that. So, but the one thing is you do not want to make silly mistakes. You want to play disciplined ball still. You want to make sure you're not going out there and committing a bunch of penalties, giving them any kind of energy or whatever. You don't want that. You want to make sure you're playing clean ball, on this one. And you want to make sure, obviously, you don't get any targeting penalties this time around. You know, I don't even want to get started on that again, but you just want to play just a very clean game. If you're Blake Baker and you can walk out of this saying, okay, we pitched a shutout, we held them, to really low averages tonight, and then nobody got ejected, nobody, got penalized a whole lot for a whole bunch of stuff. We played a really clean game. We got out of here with the win. You feel great about it for sure. I think there's really just not a whole lot of stuff defensively at this point that we can point at LSU that they haven't already proven. They've proven they've got the pass coverage against, Florida. They've proven they can go up against offenses with weapons, you know, and shut them down. They've held both Clemson and Florida to 0 points in the second half in both of those games. And look, yes, maybe both of those teams are not quite as good as we thought they were going into the year, but those were still teams that have weapons, that have, quarterbacks with some talent, that you went in there and you did that against. And so it's still an impressive feat by all means that you were able to do that. And so again, defensively, there's just not a whole lot of things that you can point out in this game as being, oh, well, if I can see this, I'd be happy. It's like in years past, we could say, okay, well, if we can at least see that they can shut down the run against this team, a lower ranked school, a Nichols or whatever. Oh, well, if we can stop the run against Nichols, at least we can do that. If we can get a couple interceptions against Army, well, at least the defense can, do that against a lower ranked team. We don't have to worry about, Army putting up points or Nichols putting up points or whatever. But we didn't even get that in the past. We weren't even really able to have that a lot of times when we played smaller schools. But this one just has a different feel because I feel like we've seen the defense go out there and just do exactly what they've needed to do. So I have no doubt in my mind that that's going to be the exact same thing we see once again on Saturday night against Southeast Louisiana. Now, the one thing I will say defensively is I want to see some of those young linebackers that got in the game last week, Zach Weeks, more Devon Keys, more Tyler Singleton. Like, I want to see more of those guys play, just because, we know what we have with Whit Weeks. Wes Weeks is probably doubtful for this one. He's probably just going to take a game off to rest, which is by all means very, very smart by the coaching staff to just let him rest for this one, and then get him ready for Ole Miss. But, we know what we have with the better linebackers that we have. I want to see what the kind of the future of that position is looking like, just because up until really last week, Witt and West had played a lot. Obviously Harold Perkins is playing the star out there a lot. So I just want to see some of the depth that we have there that maybe we haven't gotten to see as much of. And so I'd love to see that. I'd love to see a lot of these younger defensive linemen that we haven't gotten to see a whole lot go out there as well. Again, we've seen a lot of Dominic McKinley, Ahmad Bro, the talented sophomores. We've seen obviously a lot of Bernard Gooden, Jack Pyburn, Jamari Butler, Patrick Payton. We've seen a lot of them, and they're great. I'm not saying that they're not awesome, but let's go see what the future is behind it again, because a lot of these guys are going to be gone after this year. I mean, let's be honest, Witt and West are both probably going to be gone after this year. A lot of those guys that I just listed on the defensive line outside of Bro and McKinley, who are true sophomores, will be gone after this year. Like, there's just not a whole lot of guarantees on, in the front seven beyond this year. So let's go ahead and take a look and take a sneak peek at what some of the future talent is going to look like. Because we know there's several guys that they're high on in the linebacker room. There's several guys that they're very high on in the defensive line room. Like, let's see those guys and let them play some significant snaps in this one. That's what I want to see. And then also, too, I mean, I feel like in the secondary, yes, you can say the same thing, but I feel like we've seen a lot of the younger pieces. DJ Pickett obviously has played a lot. We know, like, when it comes to outside corners, the future is really in good hands with DJ Pickett. Now, I would like to see maybe some of the backup safeties in this one, just because after Halsey and, I think Cooley is like a redshirt sophomore of leave, so I don't think he's going to necessarily leave after this season, but you don't ever know. What's going through their heads, especially if LSU does make the college football playoff. If they do make a run for a championship, does his stock for some reason rise and he decides to leave? I don't know. But, we know about what Deshaun Spears did last week against Florida. Can you get him some more reps? Can you get some of these other safeties that are already on the roster that are going to be around beyond this season? At least on paper, they should be. Can you get them in the game and a little bit more involved? And we just see some of the future, more than anything. Because really, against this team, you should have the flexibility to play a lot more guys. So defensively, again, it's not really as much of I want to see this or that or the other. I mostly just want to see the backups, and I want to see the guys that are going to be the future of the defensive side of the football. That's just what I want to see. If they can continue to build on this Bayou Bandits defense for years to come. But offensively, there are some more things that I just have written down. And again, it's not so much X's and O's or anything. It's just, I think there's a lot more stuff that offensively, we need to see be fixed, but also just things that I want to see, because that is the more concerning side of the ball right now. And the first thing up is Nussmeier. Look, I don't know why all of a sudden the nugget just got dropped, this week that Nussmeier had that torso injury. I don't know if that was just Brian Kelly throwing that out as something to be like, hey, let's soften the blow a little bit. Hey, look, Nussmeier's been banged up, and maybe he is. I don't know. Some people that I trust that I've listened to a lot in the Baton Rouge media and in national media have said they do think that has been something since fall camp, like, but they weren't really sure. But there was a theory, not with the knee injury that he had suffered in camp or whatever, but there was some concern that he had suffered some other type of injury at fall camp, and maybe that was kind of hindering him a little bit. But obviously, he never showed up on an injury report. He never showed up, with anything like that going on. And it makes sense a little bit, if it is a torso injury, that would explain why they're not trying to push the ball down the field as much because it's hard to get a lot of power when you can't turn, your upper torso. Like that's where you get a lot of that velocity from. It's not necessarily your arm strength, it's your mechanics. And when mechanically you cannot twist that torso, that is very hard for a quarterback to deliver a throw. So, yes, maybe that explains some of it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, well, he's been playing through this, so it's obviously not super severe, whatever it is. But in a game against Southeast Louisiana, he shouldn't have to play at all. But the problem is they are determined to play him. For some reason, they feel like they need to play him to where I want to just stop them cold turkey and say, why? Why does he have to play on Saturday night? We know what Garrett Nussmeier can do when he's fully healthy. We've seen him go out there, sling the rock, and look really good at times. Like we've seen him do that. Why do we have to, try to prove something, on Saturday night? I feel like this is just going to be a game where we're trying to show off the offense because we haven't done so really a whole lot in the first 3 weeks, and I just feel like they're trying to overcorrect a little bit by playing Nussmeier and all that. It's like, no, 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 no. Like if you're telling me that the offense can be better, that he could be playing better, he's just hurt right now. Like, okay, cool. Let's just leave it at that. Let's rest Nussmeier and let's get him ready for Ole Miss next week. Because I would much rather have him play against Ole Miss on the road next Saturday than him play in Southeast Louisiana. And by all means, knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt anymore than that. And then you end up losing him for a longer period of time, or for a significant chunk of time where now you're having to roll into a road game against Ole Miss with, two quarterbacks who haven't started for you this year, And so that's just one of those things of I would rather save Nuss, but again, they're determined to play him. So can you at least just get him out of the ball game quickly? And look, while he is in there, can he make a couple of throws that show us, okay, he is getting healthier? Maybe this offense can open up a little bit. Yes, that would be nice to see. But again, I don't really have to see it. But again, just get him to a point where you can take him out quickly, put in the backups because he doesn't need to be doing that. He just doesn't. That's just one of those things of I think the point is made very clear that's just not this is not the type of game where you need to push him any further because you know what you've got with him. But on the other hand, the next point I have is this, and that's we need to see the backups this week. We have not seen the backup quarterbacks really at all this season. I don't think they've played a single snap, either one of them, Colin Hurley or Michael Van Buren. And look, Michael Van Buren, we know the story. He was at Mississippi State last year. He ended up, starting for most of the year because of the Blake Shapen injury. And he did not have a bad season by any means. Now, were these numbers like eye popping, when you look at them on the stat sheet? No. I mean, he threw for 1,886 yards, 11 passing touchdowns, 7 interception, had a long throw of 72 yards. I mean, that's pretty that's a big time throw there. You had 69 carries for negative 12 yards, but he did have 5 rushing touchdowns. And that's the thing. Van Buren is more mobile. We do know that. Van Buren is the more mobile quarterback. And if you listen to the Florida recap episode, I kind of threw out this, idea of could we ever see a world where this season for LSU potentially they go back to kind of an old school thing, which it's crazy that I'm saying it's old school when it was literally like just about 20 years ago when this really became a popular thing for a couple of seasons, which was the two quarterback system. For some reason, everybody now is determined to have one starting quarterback, one guy. And look, I get it in the transfer portal era, in the NIL era, it's probably not something that a lot of guys would be intrigued in joining, knowing that, hey, I'm coming here to try to be the starter full time and all that. You're telling me I got to split reps with that guy? Yeah, obviously nobody wants to do that. But I mean, listen, at this point, what is Nussmeier just going to quit? At this point, is Van Buren just going to leave the team? Like they're pretty much into the season. It would be really detrimental to either one, especially Nussmeier, if he just flat out quit. Like, all I'm saying is this, I want to see him play this week because I want to see what he looks like. With my eyes watching him, yes, the stats never looked necessarily great last year, but he showed some real big flashes of potential. I mentioned, I got to see him at the Egg Bowl last year in person, and he impressed me with some of the things he can do. Just athletically as a quarterback, he's got some good potential. Now, again, he's got to refine a little bit, but he's got a lot of upside. And Colin Hurley is kind of the same way from what we've been told. Colin Hurley's got a lot of really high ceiling with him. It's just can he refine it? And obviously he's young. He reclassified, so he is, a younger, redshirt freshman, but apparently he's got some good talent too. Problem is we haven't really gotten to see that from him. And we haven't gotten to see Van Buren this year. We've only got what we know from Mississippi State. So can you get both of those guys in at some point to get some playing time, to get some snaps, to get some reps in a real game? It's not against a high quality opponent, but it's a real game, real action against somebody that's not your practice squad defense. And can they go out there and show us what they've got? Because again, I'm wondering if there's a world where Van Buren can come in and do some mobile quarterback, run options type stuff. Not for like the entirety of a game, but like every now and again when you just need to get some rushing offense going, can you bring Van Buren in to be that kind of a guy, like what a Ryan Perrilloux did on that 2007 national championship team? Like, I want to see when Van Buren's in the game, does Joe Sloan dial up more of that kind of stuff? I want to see what Colin Hurley looks like when he throws the ball. I just want to see those things. That's why I don't really want Nuss to play, because I would rather have like one half of Van Buren, one half of Colin Hurley, and just take notes from that. But, we're not living in that world, obviously, right now. So, anyways, all that being said, you need to get the backups in this week. We need to see what the future of that position already is looking like, because, we don't know what's going to be the case after Nussmeier leaves. Does somebody big enter the portal that you can go out there and snag? Do you need to rely on some of these guys that are already on the roster? Until we get to see them, we don't really know what to expect. So, I want to see both those guys play this week, more so for the future of the offense rather than the immediacy of this year. But still, it would be nice to notice, hey, Van Buren, they can dial up some of these run options with him. Maybe that's something we can implement into the game plan moving forward, because maybe he can help us at times when we need a rushing offense or whatever it may be. So, that's something definitely offensively I want to see. I just do. Same thing as well. Like, I want to see younger guys on the defense step up and play a lot. I want to see a lot of young O linemen go out there this week and go out there and play. It's been no question that the offensive line for LSU has kind of been one of the more strugglesome spots this season. Pass pro, they've been pretty good, but run blocking has been kind of a struggle, and you're really not, been getting good production from the right side of your line, which is weird because like Josh Thompson, they brought in from Northwestern. He was graded as a really good, player from Northwestern when he came in, according to Pro Football Focus. He had really good grades in both run blocking, pass blocking, all those things. And then you knew Weston Davis was a guy that, had talent, but he was going to take a minute to develop anyways. But both of those guys, they're PFF grades have been really, really bad. They've not been great. And Pro Football Focus is just like a tool that a lot of people use. Like it's not the end all be all indicator of whether a player is good or bad or whatever, but they do take a lot of time to watch specific things. And so, when you're not grading very well on their scale, like that is something to take note of at least. And it's been very noticeable that Braylon Moore has been awesome. PFF has graded him very highly in the games that he has played. Paul Mabenga, your left guard, while he's not been perfect, his run blocking's not always scored very highly. His pass protection has been grading very highly for the most part. And then Tyree Adams has actually been grading pretty well as, most of the season has gone along. Like your left side of the line has actually been grading out pretty decently for the most part, with kind of Moore and Adams anchoring the best grades of the offensive line, while your right side has struggled a little bit. So can you get some younger guys in there this week where, maybe you can develop some of them, guys like Curious Kern, Ori Williams? Can you get, I'm trying to think, Solomon Thomas in there? Some of these guys that have got some potential, that have got some big upside to them. Can you get them in this week and get them some reps and kind of just see what they can do, what they can look like? Yes, it's Southeast Louisiana. You're not going to be able to see as much, of the higher end potential as you would, like against the Florida, if Carius Kern went out there and held his ground against Caleb Banks or something, or, just as an example, if you saw that, then you're like, oh, okay, maybe Carius Kern is somebody we can rely upon at some point. Again, against Southeast Louisiana, you're not really going to get that kind of indication, but you can go out there and see, okay, hey, this guy does, run block pretty well, or hey, this guy does, have really good mechanics when he's, dropping back to do pass pro. Like you can still see a lot of those things in this game, even if it's not, you know, a really good test of how dominant they really are, but I want to see a lot more of the younger offensive line guys get in there, because again, it's one of those things of, this is a position group that's really been struggling. So can you find some of your guys that potentially could step up and play big roles for you this year? If some of those guys continue to struggle, that way you're not just walking out there just blindly throwing a guy out there because you're like, well, he's a veteran, you know. That's the thing is, sometimes you got to see what the younger guys can do. I mean, you think about just a couple years ago, you were starting Will Campbell at left tackle, and you weren't starting Emory Jones at first because you're like, well, we don't know if he's as developed as Will Campbell. He's a young guy, whatever. I mean, by like week 4 or whatever, Emory Jones ended up starting at right tackle, and he never looked back. Never, you know, never looked back. He never lost that starting job unless he was obviously injured or something. But outside of injuries, Emory Jones ended up starting the rest of the time he was at LSU at that right tackle position. So, all that being said, yes, sometimes it is risky to throw out a freshman or something on a line, but it can also help you out tremendously if you're in a tight spot. And I just hope they have the wherewithal this weekend to throw those guys out there and kind of see, okay, maybe this guy can take Weston Davis's spot, or maybe this guy can take Josh Thompson's spot. Maybe that would be the best for this O-line group moving forward, is if those guys made it onto the line. I don't know. That's just something we need to see, though. So O-line play, we need to see those guys go out there and do that. And look, I know everybody wants them to go out there and score points. That's going to be kind of the biggest thing. Can they go out there, score points? Can they do all these things? Scoring points, yes, would be nice. What I want to see is, can we actually have some form of an offensive identity this week? Look, I'm tired of the whole run game thing of like, we want to establish the run. We want to run the ball well, yada, 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 all these things. At this point, I don't care. Just have some form of offensive identity. If you can't run the ball, you can't run the ball. That's not great, but if you can't do it, don't force it. Do what you know you can do. And if that means you're going out there, you're throwing a lot of quick game stuff, slants, screens. Okay, cool. We're a quick moving football team. We're going to try to dice you up with quick stuff. We might try to hit you over the top every now and again with our speedsters, all those things. But if that's your identity, that's your identity. Like I want to see us establish an offensive identity this week. Yes, it's against Southeast Louisiana, but at least get that set in stone. So when you're walking into Ole Miss next week, you know what you need to do and you know how you are going to attack them. Like that's an important thing to establish now. And then on top of that as well, I mean, just can you sequence plays better if you're Joe Sloan? Can you sequence the game plan to actually not just look like you're throwing out a random play every other time you call one? I want to see a better approach to the game plan this Saturday as well. So, can we see all those things? Can all those things line up, and work out for the offense? Those are kind of my keys for them. Again, a lot more stuff I want to see out of the offense than the defense, but I think on both sides of the ball, though, the one thing we can agree on is on both sides we need no major injuries. On both sides of the ball, we don't want to see a ton of penalties. And please, just for the love of all that is good, can we please just kick the absolute doors in on this game and just absolutely go out in there and own them the entire time? Because that's just going to be such a refresher. We need a week where we can breathe a little bit because again, you go on the road next week to Ole Miss and you're going to be just absolutely stressed again. But it is one of those things. Can we just get one breather game in? Louisiana Tech should have been a breather game, and it really wasn't. Can we please just get one this Saturday against Southeast Louisiana? That's all I am asking for. But, anyways, that'll be interesting to see. And look, I will go ahead and say this. We won't have a reaction show for Southeast Louisiana. I'm actually going to be out of town, so we won't have a reaction show for that game in particular. But hopefully, we don't really need to. Hopefully, that's just a game where, again, we go in there and we do so many good things that we don't end up needing to have that discussion whatsoever. And we can just look forward to, you know, getting ready for the Ole Miss game the next week. So hopefully that is the case. But before I go into week 4 picks, just because hopefully we got a little bit of extra time here right now, I want to talk about that LSU got a really big commitment this week recruiting wise. We haven't talked a whole lot of recruiting so far, but they ended up landing a commitment for the 2027 class, and that was quarterback Peyton Houston. Now he's out of Cotton Valley, Louisiana, and is one of the top quarterbacks for the 27 class, according to Hayes Fawcett from On Three. Hayes has him listed at about 6 foot, 200 pounds. I think he's a little bit more on like the 5'10, like 5'11 side from what I've heard from local sources. But look, from everything that I have seen, everything that I have heard, from what everybody has talked about, this dude has got the traits. This dude has got the right stuff. Is he like the number one quarterback in the 2027 class? No, he's not. But he is a very talented quarterback. And from what we're also hearing a lot now is it seems like LSU kind of has settled that this is going to be their guy for the 2027 recruiting class. This is the quarterback they want. This is the guy they want. They're not really going to chase after a whole lot of other people. And look, is that, what Tiger fans necessarily wanted to hear? Probably not, just because, again, you don't know what the future of the quarterback position is going to be beyond this year after Nussmeier graduates and leaves at the end of the season. But what you know is that you did grab Michael Van Buren for a reason. You're hoping that he would develop this year and be a guy that could maybe be the front runner to be the starter next year. You still have Colin Hurley, which is a good thing, maybe after a couple years of, developing a little bit. And look, he missed spring ball because of the car accident he was in. So he hasn't gotten as much development time, because of missing that like you may have hoped for. But, he did get the fall and he's had last year. He'll have this year to continue to develop. Maybe he ends up kind of doing something as long as he doesn't transfer out or whatever. But again, it's a weird world in college football that we live in. And honestly, in this day and age, you're not going to chase after multiple quarterbacks in the same class. Like you're just not. And so for LSU fans that may be saying, well, what about Colton Nussmeier? What about, I think they'll still go after Colton Nussmeier just because like they have the tie there, with obviously Garrett being on the roster. But it just seems to me as though they are not really concerned about that position beyond that. Peyton Houston is their guy for 2027. And if they land Nussmeier, if they land one of the other guys, I guess that's a great type of situation. Like, you're like, okay, great, we got both or whatever. But they really like what they've got with Peyton Houston. And honestly, I really like what they've got with Peyton Houston. Can you land him and develop him and maybe see if he can become the next guy for the significant future? I would love that. Like that would be awesome. And we also always have to remember this too. We live in a day and age in college football where you can go grab a transfer quarterback every offseason. You have that opportunity because look, I guarantee you at LSU, if you throw out the right NIL offer to somebody, they'll come. They'll make it to campus. It's one of those things now of quarterbacks are actually interested in coming to LSU. Yes, the offense hasn't looked great this year, but they've seen it turn around. They've seen Joe Burrow. They've seen Jaden Daniels. They know what LSU can do, and they've seen the weapons that LSU can get. Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. These guys that are in the NFL balling out, I mean, they see that. Quarterbacks now know when they come to LSU, they'll actually be able to throw the ball. They'll be able to throw it to guys that are really, really good. And that makes it more enticing for them. So we're not living in the Les Miles age of things where we're just praying that some quarterback will finally take the chance to come here. Quarterbacks want to come to LSU now. And again, even if you're not landing the top high school guys, we're also in this era of like, not that it just doesn't matter, but it's like, I could also go out into the transfer portal and grab a guy that's already been playing for a couple years and has already kind of refined his skill set a little bit. Again, you want to continue to land top recruits in high school. Don't get me wrong about that. But we just live in a different day and age where now you can go get a veteran guy if you can't land a young guy. And yeah, he may be a 1 year rental, but he can play and you can have a good season with that. So it's weird, but we're no longer going to ever be in a situation. Now, I heard somebody say this, this week on a Baton Rouge station show that said, we're never going to see a class where you're landing both a Jamarcus Russell and a Matt Flynn out of high school. We're just not. That's just not going to be the case anymore. We're not going to see that happen for LSU moving forward. We're not going to see it for any team really moving forward. Like I said, two quarterback systems don't really exist anymore. And that's because everybody wants to be the guy and they want to have a starter. It's just the thing. So, again, big news for LSU because that makes recruiting a lot easier now, knowing you potentially got your 2027 guy. Now, again, it's 2027. There's a long way to go with this process. A long way to go with this process till he actually signs on the dotted line and comes to campus and all those good things. But that is a good sign for the future that you're getting a guy committed already with a lot of upside, a lot of potential. He's from Louisiana. He loves LSU. Like, this was really good. So Peyton Houston committing to LSU's 2027 class as a quarterback. Big time news there. But now it's time to look ahead at week 4 of college football, and we're going to break down the games of the week, and I'll give you my predictions for them. All right, let's talk about some week 4 matchups here. The first one we've got is Auburn going on the road to take on Oklahoma, where Oklahoma is currently a 7-point favorite at home. This is a game that is really interesting only because it's two teams that I'm just not sure about. Because Jackson Arnold to me, well, yes, I know he had that big game against Baylor and all that. Like, they just let him run all over the field, basically. I mean, he had a ridiculous night running the football. And John Mateer is another quarterback that I've been very skeptical of, and he's thrown a pick in every game so far this year. And just, yes, is he athletically gifted? Absolutely. Has he played a little bit better than I expected? Yes, absolutely. But this is just one of those they're just two of these teams that I don't really trust the quarterbacks fully. I don't really know if I trust, that either team is really as good as what they've quote unquote looked like so far. I'm just very skeptical about this game, but I will say this. I think Oklahoma being at home, yes, it's an afternoon game, so it's not like you're getting the nighttime environment or whatever. I just don't know if Auburn's really going to be able to beat them. I think Brent Venables will try to dial something up, especially because he knows Jackson Arnold so well. I think Brent Venables, much more so than even Dave Aranda, will try to dial something up for Jackson Arnold to make him try to throw the ball. And I just don't know if Jackson Arnold's really got the ability throwing the ball to really keep Auburn in the game. Now, I could be wrong. He could go out there and ball out. I just don't know if he's got that passing ability from what I saw last year and from what I've even seen this year in a game like against Baylor. The weapons are pretty good at Auburn. Cam Coleman's a monster, but I just don't know if Jackson Arnold himself is going to be good enough to throw the ball down the field and actually do what you need him to do. So, all that being said, I'm not trying to hate on, Auburn. I just think I like that Oklahoma a little bit more. Yes, Mateer, I don't trust him as much either, but I do trust him more than Arnold. And I think he'll do it just enough more to help his team win the game. So I got Oklahoma beating Auburn this week. I do like that 7-point favorite. I do think that will hold up. So next up, we got Miami versus Florida, where Miami is a 9.5-point favorite. And goodness gracious, if you had asked me at the beginning of the year about this game, I would have said a 9.5-point favorite for Miami. I don't feel good about that one. Florida may keep this thing tight. Florida may keep this thing interesting, all these things. And after how Florida has started off the year, Miami at 9.5 doesn't seem as crazy now. Now, listen, Florida could absolutely come into this game and put up the best fight they've shown all year long. They could go in there and play a lot better than most people expect of them. DJ Lagway just does not look like he's got a clue as what's going on right now. And the offense just doesn't look like they've got a clue as to what's going on right now. It's just it's just a team that looks lost. It's just a team that looks like it doesn't know what it's going out there and trying to accomplish. Now, defensively, they've still got a pretty formidable defense. Like that defensive line, that front seven, they really are a pretty good unit. Like, I honestly think this could be a game where Miami's offense doesn't put up as many big numbers as they have in the first couple of weeks, just because that Florida defense still has got a lot of talent on it. But at the same time, Miami has upgraded their weapons a lot. I mean, they brought in Carson Beck, they brought in CJ Daniels, from LSU. They had good weapons already on the roster. Like, they've got a good team. They've got a good offense. They've got a pretty solid defense. Like, I just think Miami will take this one, and I think they'll probably take it a little bit easier than most. I just don't know how DJ Lagway recovers from last week where he threw 5 interceptions. I mean, he just looked absolutely bamboozled. He really did. He had that one really good touchdown throw. And then really beyond that, he looked absolutely lost and confused. And it was kind of sad seeing just how much he had really fallen off. It was obviously great for us. Love that for us, but not looking great for him moving forward. So, all that being said, I will pick Miami in this one, and we'll see how that holds up. Next game up is Illinois versus Indiana. Now, the only game that I've seen really either one of these teams play where I've invested really heavily into it was Illinois versus Duke, and Illinois just kind of really, I mean, put the hurting on them at some point. But Indiana is a 6.5-point favorite in this one. And the only problem I really have with that is that when you look at Indiana's schedule, they haven't really played anybody. Like, they just have not played anybody to where I say, oh, wow, well, that was a quality indicator that this is a really, really good team. They've played Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. And in those three games, Old Dominion scored 14 on them, and they only scored 27 against them. They blew the brakes off of Kennesaw State 56-9, and they absolutely beat down Indiana State 73-0. But that's the thing. You know, I mean, those are all teams that I obviously think Indiana should be superior to. Now, Illinois has also not played a ton of opponents that are like super quality. They've played Western Illinois, they beat the brakes off of them. Western Michigan beat the brakes off of them. But again, they did play Duke, an ACC team, beat them 45-19. And both quarterbacks have put up similar numbers. I think where a lot of people are favoring Miami, or sorry, not Miami, Indiana, is because, like, looking at their offensive stats, right now they're third in the FBS in total offense with 592 yards per game, basically. They're 27th with, in passing yards. They're currently third in rushing and seventh in totals in scoring offensively. But of course, again, look at who they've played. They've also been obviously putting up great defensive numbers. They're ninth in overall defense, sixth in passing defense, but they're 54th right now in rushing defense, and they're also sixth in scoring defense. Now, listen, when you look at Illinois' offense, they're 62nd in the FBS in terms of total offense, but they're putting up 405 yards per game. They're 59th in passing offense, they're 69th in rushing offense, 15th in scoring offense with a 45-point per game average. Their defense is pretty good, 29th in the FBS. And listen, you can be top 30 in total defense in the country. You've got a pretty good chance to be competitive in 2025 college football. 56th in passing defense, 14th in rushing defense, 5th in scoring defense. I think why people are leaning towards Indiana is because they've been blowing the brakes off of teams. They've looked really good in a lot of their matchups. Defensively, they're playing really well. But I think that Illinois is going to come into this one and prove a lot of people wrong. I really do. And not that I'm thinking Illinois is one of the best teams in college football, but I think they're better than Indiana. I do. I think they're going to be a better team than Indiana. And I just believe that Illinois is being slept on a little bit in this one. So I've picked Illinois to win this one. I have Illinois winning this game over Indiana, and maybe I'll be flat out wrong. Maybe Indiana will run away with this thing, but I think that's a game to very much so keep your eye on because Illinois is ranked number 9 right now in the country. Right, if we just went off of rankings today and ended the season right here, Illinois would be a top 12 team in the college football playoff. So, again, it's really early, but I want to see how they do. And this is going to be their first kind of real test. It's going to be Indiana's first real test, too. So, either way, we'll learn a lot, but I do have Illinois beating Indiana in this one. And then the last game is the big noon kickoff game, which is Texas Tech versus Utah. Now, Utah right now is a 3-point favorite. So basically, it's starting to get to that point where it's really tight, and I wouldn't be surprised if it drops down even more because both of these teams right now, statistically, are very, very similar. And Utah offensively, they're 15th in the FBS in total offense, mostly anchored by their rushing game, which is 7th in total or 7th in the country. Their passing offense is only 71st. Scoring offense is 14th. Their defense is 11th overall, 20th in pass, 26th in rush, 8th in scoring. Now, Texas Tech offensively, this is wild. Texas Tech is second in the FBS right now in offense with 602, basically 603 yards per game. They're second in passing offense. They're 28th in rushing offense, and they're first in scoring offense with 58 points per game. Now, of course, I don't know if they've really played anybody or not, but and then defensively, they're also 15th right now in the country in overall defense, 50th in passing, but second in rushing defense. and 22nd in scoring defense with 11.7 points per game. Now, let's go back and look at their schedules because obviously that could be a big determining factor. Here, Utah has beaten UCLA, who is terrible, Cal Poly, and Wyoming. So not necessarily the toughest of schedules up to this point. Texas Tech has played Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Kent State, and Oregon State, and they beat Oregon State 45-14, which is a pretty good win, especially early in the season, I guess. But here's the thing. I do like Utah. I've always liked Utah a lot. Utah's kind of a lot like, what I've thought about Georgia Tech. They're just kind of gritty and tough. Like they just always give teams just a handful when they play. I mean, they've been Oregon, Oregon hates to see Utah be really good. Now, the kind of the storyline with this game is Utah's quarterback, Dampier, he's not thrown an interception so far through 3 games. And, and it's interesting because now he's going into this game against Texas Tech. 65% of the country is picking Utah in this one. Like I said, they're a 3-point favorite. And look, I like Utah defensively. I think Utah's a very tough defense. Their coach always has them playing very hard-nosed football, very tough football. It's a very good brand of football. But Texas Tech is flat out moving the ball. Like they are flat out moving the ball. And their defense is also pretty good. And they're, being backed up by their defense right now, too. I think this could be a game where, best offense goes out there and slings the rock around and does something good. And I think that could be Texas Tech. And so, yes, it's at Utah, but it's also an 11 a.m. kickoff, which I think can really impact how a flow of a game goes on the road. So I've actually picked Texas Tech to beat Utah this week. So Texas Tech over Utah, which means my picks for this week is Oklahoma over Auburn, Miami over Florida, Illinois over Indiana, and Texas Tech over Utah. I had a really good week last week picking games. May not go so well this week, but we'll just have to see. But that is going to be what we wrap up on this week. And again, kind of a weird weekend where LSU's game, is happening, but it's not the biggest game in the world. So we won't have our reaction show on Monday while I'm out of town, but we will have a preview episode for Ole Miss the following, so next Friday, we will have another episode previewing Ole Miss and highlighting the week 5 college football games. So make sure to stay tuned for that. If you guys would, please make sure to like, share, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. If you're on YouTube, wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button. That would be awesome. But we just appreciate you guys following along, checking us out, and hanging out with us. I mean, it is a ton of fun. I hope you guys have an awesome weekend. Take in all of these great week 4 matchups. And of course, let's go Tigers.